Hey guys, tonight we are wandering into the kind of story that makes you glad you live in an age where the worst thing you get chased for is forgetting to pay your Netflix subscription. You are about to stand in the middle of Europe. The year is 1192, and the man who is supposed to be the strongest king of Christendom has simply vanished. Poof. 1. Moment Richard the Lionheart is returning from the Crusades. The next moment he is gone, as if the earth swallowed him. You, my friend, would not have survived 5 minutes in this mess. No Wi-Fi, no Uber, and definitely no police hotline to call when your king disappears. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there. I am always thrilled to hear that someone, somewhere, is drifting to sleep while these strange stories roll on. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking along muddy roads in the heart of Europe, carriages rattling past, boots sinking into the muck, the air thick with wood smoke and suspicion. Word spreads faster than wildfire. Richard the Lionheart has been captured. Captured not on the battlefield, but while traveling in disguise, slipping through territories that were less than friendly. Imagine Superman trying to sneak through airport security wearing only some. The disguise worked about that well. You hear peasants whispering in the tavern. Was it Duke Leopold of Austria who grabbed him? Or was it the German emperor eager to humiliate England? The more you listen, the more tangled it becomes. Some say Richard insulted Leopold during the crusade, tearing down the Duke's banner. Others claim Leopold just wanted ransom money, which, to be fair, was the medieval equivalent of winning the lottery. Historians still argue over exactly which insult or ambition sealed Richard's fate, and you lean closer, ears straining, because gossip is the only medieval entertainment cheaper than ale. Picture the scene: a mighty king, once leading armies under the blazing sun of Jerusalem, now shackled in a cold stone tower, guarded by soldiers who cannot believe their luck. His golden hair hidden under a rough cloak, his sword taken away, his royal ring useless. And England back home, it trembles. Without its lion, the realm feels more like a frightened sheep. Nobles eye the throne hungrily. His brother John, yes, the same John who later gets immortalized as the villain in every Robin Hood story, starts plotting already. You can almost hear him rubbing his hands together, like a medieval cartoon villain. But the most dramatic part is the ransom. To free Richard, his people must raise a sum so absurd it might as well have been half the kingdom's GDP. And guess what ordinary peasants had to cough up the coins? Imagine the taxman knocking on your door and saying, "Sorry, we need to buy back the king. Hand over your life savings." You grumble, but of course, everyone pays. Because saying no is not an option unless you enjoy Dungeons and Rats for company. As you drift further into this world, the details feel sharper. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, shaping coins for ransom. The cries of merchants grumbling that trade has slowed without royal protection. Mothers hushing children with stories that the king will return, stronger than before, while fathers worry if the ransom will ever be enough. And in the quiet corners, whispers rise. Did Richard deserve this fate? Was it justice for arrogance, or the unlucky hand of politics? You let the questions swirl around you like smoke. Think about it today. When politicians vanish, we get breaking news, alerts, and Twitter threads dissecting every rumor. Back then, news meant a rider thundering into town, breathless, and the rumor mill filling in the rest. No hashtags, just gossip over wooden mugs of ale. And yet the mystery feels the same when power disappears. Everyone looks for someone to blame. In one smoky hall, a minstrel sings of Richard's bravery, painting him as the heroic captive. In another, a drunk soldier insists the king's pride doomed him. You sip from your cup, letting the voices blur, wondering who is closer to the truth. Somewhere in the cold night, the Lionheart sits behind bars, perhaps laughing bitterly at the thought that even kings can be hunted like common men. The tale doesn't settle. Even centuries later, we still cannot decide if Richard was the boldest king undone by envy, or a reckless warrior whose hubris finally caught up with him. The mystery is what keeps the story alive, what makes you lean in closer even now. And as the fire crackles and the tavern doors creak against the wind, you realize the medieval most wanted list is not just about villains. Sometimes it is the kings themselves who end up hunted, and their downfall feels both inevitable and strangely human. Your eyes grow heavy, but curiosity keeps them half open. If a king can vanish, what about a queen? What about the woman who was called the she-wolf of France? The shadows shift, and already another figure steps into the story. The fire in the tavern dies down, and the chatter about the vanished king gives way to another story. One whispered with even more caution, as if her very spirit might overhear. They call her Isabella of France, but history prefers a harsher nickname, the she-wolf. You imagine how the name would trend today, hashtags arguing whether she was a feminist icon or a medieval villain. Either way, you know one thing. You would not have wanted to be her husband. Picture it. England in the early 1300s. The air is thick with smoke from chimneys, and thicker still with resentment. Isabella is married to Edward II, a king more interested in his companions' men, who had his ear and perhaps his heart than in ruling a stable realm. While nobles seethe, Isabella waits. She plays the long game, and when queens play long games, entire kingdoms feel the tremors. You sit by a window in London, the streets below churning with mud and gossip. Merchants trade cloth, children chase chickens, and somewhere, someone mutters about the queen who does not act like a queen should. Was she patient, loyal, overlooked? Or was she already sharpening her claws? The truth, as always, is blurry, like smoke caught in a draught. Here's the part that makes you lean in closer. Edward II was accused of favoritism, pouring wealth and lands onto men like Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser. Think of it like modern nepotism, except with castles instead of corner offices. Nobles hated it. Isabella, too, was pushed aside, humiliated. At one point, she was stripped of her income, her lands seized, her dignity trampled. Imagine your spouse not just ignoring you, but repossessing your Netflix password and giving it to their best friend. That's humiliation on a royal scale. And then, the shift. Isabella flees to France, officially to negotiate, unofficially to plot. There she meets Roger Mortimer, a man with the charisma of a wolf and the ambition to match hers. Their alliance, some whisper it was romantic, others call it purely political, becomes the stuff of legend. Was she driven by love, by revenge, or simply by survival? Historians circled that question like moths around a candle. Never able to land. Picture the return. Isabella and Mortimer marching into England with an army at their backs. The city of London throws open its gates to them, the people cheering. Even monks are said to have blessed their cause, though one suspects the blessings came easier with soldiers standing nearby. Edward flees, captured later like a rabbit in the hedges, and soon the once powerful king is locked away. His crown, his dignity, even his life all stripped. Now comes the part no one agrees on. Edward II dies in captivity. Some chroniclers swear he was murdered in a gruesome, unforgettable way, a tale told so often it has burned into folklore. Others argue he may have lived in secret exile, a ghost wandering far from his throne. The uncertainty is maddening, the kind of debate that would dominate late-night talk shows today. Was it cold-blooded execution, or a quiet vanishing into obscurity? The records leave just enough gaps to keep you awake at night. Meanwhile, Isabella and Mortimer rule in the name of her young son, Edward III. For a moment, she is at the height of power, the queen turned regent, her word shaping the fate of England. But power, as you know, is like hot coal, hold it too tightly and it burns. Nobles grow restless again, whispers multiply, and before long, Isabella finds herself not the hunter but the prey. Edward III grows up, seizes power, and Mortimer is dragged to the scaffold. Isabella is spared execution, perhaps out of filial pity, perhaps because a young king still needed the presence of his mother. She lives out her days in relative quiet, but the wolfish nickname sticks forever. What's most haunting is how the story bends, depending on who tells it. To some, Isabella is a liberator, overthrowing a weak king for the sake of her son and country. To others, she is a traitor, a wife who conspired against her husband, spilling blood to taste power. Even today, you can't quite decide which version to believe. It's like watching a courtroom drama where both sides present evidence so convincing. You flip your allegiance every few minutes. And here's the strange, lesser-known thread. Centuries later, when her tomb was opened, Isabella's body was said to be dressed in the veil of a nun. Was it penance, a final attempt to cloak herself in piety? Or just the church's tidy way of rewriting the story? Even her bones refuse to answer clearly. You sip from your cup, letting the tavern air grow heavier. Outside, rain lashes against the shutters, the kind of rain that makes every cobblestone shine like wet glass. And you realize something. Queens and kings might play their bloody games, but the ordinary folk, the bakers, the smiths, the children splashing in puddles, just try to endure. They pay the price, in coins and in fear, while history argues over who was hero or monster. And isn't that the point? You glance around your own room, safe, warm, free from plots and poisoned cups. No army marches at your door, no rival waiting to brand you traitor at dawn. Whatever grievances modern life piles up, emails, rent, traffic, they are mercifully mild compared to the terror of living under the shadow of a she-wolf. And maybe, just maybe, that realization makes you breathe easier, even as the story grows darker. Because if a king can vanish and a queen can devour, then what else might be hiding in the folds of medieval history, waiting to snarl at the unsuspecting? You lean back, the tavern fire flickering low, curiosity tugging you onward. Somewhere in the corner, you catch the murmur of knights whose prayers turn to secrets. And suddenly, the next hunted name is ready to step into the circle. The tavern grows quieter, the stories rolling one into the next, like smoke curling in rafters. And now, someone leans in closer, voice dropping, as though centuries later the Vatican might still be listening. The Knights Templar, once holy warriors, defenders of the cross, feared across battlefields. But here, in the flickering candlelight, they are whispered about, not as saints, but as fugitives. You shift on your stool, realizing this isn't just a tale of swords and prayers, it's a manhunt. One of the largest the medieval world ever knew. Imagine it, the early 1300s, the Templars, rich from donations and clever banking schemes, have vaults heavier than a dragon's hoard. They own land, castles, fleets. And yet, one dawn in 1307, King Philip IV of France decides he wants all of it. So he does what any modern ruler might do: stage a scandal. Arrest warrants fly out like medieval spam emails, accusing the Templars of heresy, blasphemy, and every crime that makes people sit straighter in pews. You can almost hear the headlines: Holy Knights found guilty of midnight pagan parties. Now, here's where your curiosity itches. Many confessed, but under torture, which is a little like getting someone to admit they enjoy kale smoothies. You'll say anything if the rack is waiting. Still, the charges stick. Suddenly, men once admired as holy warriors are branded heretics. Stripped of honor, shackled in chains. Picture a Paris square in 1314. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Malle, stands before the crowd, his beard white, his voice steady. He declares the order innocent, and then the flames rise. Witnesses claim he cursed the king and the pope, predicting their deaths within the year. And here's the eerie part: they did die within that year. Coincidence? Divine retribution? Or just the medieval version of very bad timing? Even now, historians sidestep certainty, the debate whispering like embers long after the fire died. But the story doesn't end with ashes, because rumors grow where facts crumble. People mutter about secret Templar treasure buried deep under Paris, or spirited away by ships that vanished at sea. Gold, relics, forbidden texts, some even say the Holy Grail itself. You glance around your modern living room, and suddenly that cluttered drawer of old receipts feels less disappointing. Think about it: if such treasure truly existed, it has eluded kings, popes, and centuries of treasure hunters. Some archaeologists call it fantasy, others suggest there might have been caches scattered quietly across Europe. The uncertainty is what keeps the legend alive, the itch in the back of your mind, the whisper that makes you lean forward and wonder. And here's a small, strange detail few recall while the order was crushed in France. In other regions, like Portugal, they simply rebranded, slipping into new names and fresh uniforms. Imagine getting cancelled online, only to come back the next day with a different username and a slightly tweaked profile picture. The church approved it. The knights carried on. It was less an end, more a costume change. You wonder, sitting in that tavern haze, whether these knights were victims of greed, guilty of hidden rites, or both. Did they really kneel before false idols? Or did a desperate king invent monsters to fatten his purse? The truth slides between fingers like sand. All we're left with are whispers, contradictions, and the flicker of stories that refuse to die. And before the embers fade, another figure begins to form from the smoke. An outlaw cloaked in green, lurking in Sherwood Forest. A man some hail as hero, others condemn as thief. But was he ever real at all? The smoke from the Templar tales hasn't settled before another shadow steps into the firelighter. Figure draped, not in armor or silk, but in myth itself. Robin Hood, outlaw, hero, criminal, a man so slippery he dodges not only the sheriff's arrows, but history's pen as well. You lean forward, the way you might at a campfire when the storyteller pauses just long enough to make you wonder what's hiding in the dark. Picture Sherwood, forest, tall oaks stretching overhead. leaves whispering like a crowd of gods. Somewhere between the ferns, a band of ragged men chuckles, their laughter mixing with the clink of stolen coins. And at the center, a hooded figure with a bow, charming enough to make noble ladies swoon, and bold enough to relieve wealthy bishops of their heavy purses. It's a scene painted in countless ballads. But ballads aren't bank statements. They exaggerate, smooth, and hide. So did Robin Hood actually exist? That's the itch you can't quite scratch. Medieval court records do mention men named Robhod or Robert Hood, but the names could just as easily mean generic troublemaker, like saying John Doe the outlaw. One chronicler calls him a menace. Another praises his sense of justice. It's like scrolling through modern reviews, online half glowing, half scathing, and none entirely trustworthy. The popular story paints him as a noble thief, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find versions where he's less philanthropist and more highway robber with good marketing. In some songs, he murders without hesitation. In others, he spares priests if they sing a hymn. Historians still circle the contradictions, wondering whether the myth grew from one real man, a cluster of outlaws, or simply the desperate wish for someone to balance the scales. And here's a detail often overlooked: those famous green clothes. Some say they weren't just for camouflage. Green dye was expensive, tricky to make, often fading to muddy brown. If he truly wore green, it was a statement, almost like buying brand-name sneakers just to remind everyone you could. Others argue the Lincoln green was a poetic flourish, invented later by balladeers who wanted a hero to look the part. Was it fashion or fact? The debate lingers like the forest fog. Now, imagine how he'd look today. Instead of lurking in Sherwood, maybe he'd be hacking corporate bank accounts or intercepting billionaires' yachts. Instead of merry men with longbows, a group chat plotting raids on delivery trucks. And just like now, people would argue, is he a criminal draining society or a rebel exposing corruption? Perspective decides the label, but whether he was real or not, the myth tells us something about what people longed for. Justice, however messy. A champion who would dare to thumb his nose at corrupt officials, even if his methods were, let's say, ethically flexible. It's comforting, isn't it, to imagine that when authority failed, the forest itself raised a protector. That's why the story endures, shifting shape through centuries, appearing in poems, plays, films, even Saturday morning cartoons. And then, softly, another voice threads through the tavern Erno, outlaw this time. But a girl not yet 20, armored not in myth but in unshakable faith. She leads armies, shakes kingdoms, and then stands accused of witchcraft. Joan of Arc, the hunted saint, steps out of the smoke. When authority faltered, a hooded figure stepped out of the shadows. But now, the firelight flickers again, and this time it doesn't reveal a rogue with a bout. Illuminates a girl, barely 17, her hair cut short like a soldier's, her eyes burning brighter than any torch. Joan of Arc, not a legend stitched from tavern songs, but a flesh and blood teenager who made kings tremble and priests clutch their rosaries. You can almost hear the disbelief of her time, a peasant girl riding at the front of armies, not as a mascot, but as a commander. Imagine walking into your office today, a teenager announcing they'll be leading the next corporate merger, and everyone just agreeing. That was Joan's world. Except replace office chairs with armored horses and PowerPoints with banners fluttering above lances. Her story is told often. A girl who claimed divine voices guided her, who led French forces against the English, who lifted sieges and shifted the momentum of wars. But let's twist the lens a little. Many retellings frame her as an obedient saint, but some chronicles describe her as sharp-tongued, refusing to bow even to nobles. A soldier recalled she would ride through camp, scolding grown men for swearing. That's not just holy, it's gutsy teenage energy. And here's a lesser-known whisper during her campaigns. She insisted on wearing a specially designed suit of armor. It wasn't ordinary, it fit her frame snugly, forged at great expense, and she guarded it carefully. After her capture, it vanished. Some believe it was melted down, others claim it was secretly kept as a relic. Even now, scholars scratch their heads. Where did Joan's armor go? Was it destroyed, or does it rest in some dusty chest, forgotten, waiting for discovery? When her victories turned sour, her enemies sharpened their knives. They captured her, and instead of treating her as a prisoner of war, they hauled her into a courtroom that felt more like a stage. She was accused not just of heresy, but of something almost laughable. Wearing men's clothes became Exhibit A in the case for witchcraft. Picture that. Leading armies was forgivable, but trousers, absolutely unforgivable. It's like saying the real crime of the century was mismatched socks. Historians still wrestle with the question of how much of her trial was politics disguised as piety. Was she truly feared as a witch, or simply too useful a symbol to be allowed to live? The records are thick with contradictions. Some transcripts praise her composure under pressure. Others paint her as naive. But even through the scribbles of hostile clerks, her clarity shines. This teenager facing execution often out-argued men twice her age, and when they condemned her to burn, the city square filled with spectators. Some accounts claim the executioner wept. One chronicler noted the crowd cried Jesus as the flames rose, perhaps realizing they were destroying someone extraordinary. A detail easy to forget. After the ashes cooled, her heart was said to remain intact, unburned. A strange relic that fueled whispers she truly was touched by something divine. Was it miracle or a natural quirk of combustion? The line blurs, leaving more mystery than certainty. Now imagine her today. Would Joan be a teenage activist trending on social media, calling out injustice with viral speeches? Would she be on trial in the court of public opinion, accused of being too radical or just a kid? The same debates circle: visionary or fanatic, saint or heretic, leader or pawn. Labels depend on who's writing the history or who's running the comment section. But her story leaves a message worth clutching. Courage doesn't ask for permission. Joan didn't wait to be told she was allowed to lead. She just stepped forward, guided by her conviction. And while her ending was brutal, her name endures, inspiring people who feel too small to matter. That's the odd comfort history offers. From a medieval battlefield rises a reminder that even the quietest voice can spark upheaval. And as her flames dim in memory, another shadow takes shape, this one carrying not a sword but barrels of gunpowder beneath the streets of London. A mask, a plot, a night that still flickers in fireworks centuries later, the hunted face of treason, known as Guy Fawkes. You settle into the hush of the night. A candle guttering on the table, the smoke curling like secrets not meant to be spoken aloud. And there it is, a name that flares like a spark in the dark Guy Fawkes. The man, the mask, the yearly bonfire effigy. You think you know him. The fellow who tried to blow up Parliament with barrels of gunpowder. But as you listen, you realize the story is not quite so neat. not nearly so straightforward. History rarely is. It prefers shadows, half-truths, and the occasional mischievous grin. Picture it: London, November 1605, damp cellars beneath the Palace of Westminster, where powder kegs squat in silence. Fawkes, not the ringleader but the chosen hand, crouches in the dark. His task was simple: strike a match and erase a government in one brilliant blaze. But history rarely rewards simplicity. He was caught, dragged up, and branded forever as the face of the gunpowder plot. Almost theatrical, isn't it? If it were a Netflix show today, critics would complain it's too on the nose. And yet this is the tale we inherited. The curious thing is, Fawkes wasn't even the mastermind. He was the skilled soldier, the demolition expert hired to do the dirty work. The real schemer, Robert Catesby, whose name is softer on the tongue and far easier to forget. Strange, isn't it, how memory prefers the man with a dramatic beard over the strategist in the shadows? Maybe we all just like a villain with good branding. If Instagram had existed back then, Fawkes would have trended while poor Catesby stayed in the comments section. And here lies a whisper of the unexpected. Not all barrels found were actually filled with powder. Some scholars murmur that the number was exaggerated after the fact, to amplify the sense of danger, to justify harsher laws against Catholics. A propaganda flourish, if you like. The detail flickers between fact and myth, depending on which historian's candlelight you read by, and still, the trial reports glow with official certainty, as though the truth could be pinned down with ink and wax seals. It couldn't. Imagine the city above. As dawn broke on November 5th, London buzzed with rumour and fear. Bells rang, bonfires lit, sermons thundered about divine salvation. Children cheered at flames, never quite realizing what was at stake. You can almost hear the crackle of wood, the pop of damp logs, the smoke curling into lungs that were already half destroyed by coal soot. It was a carnival of loyalty, a theatre of survival. Today, of course, we have fireworks and sparklers and questionable toffee apples. The threat is gone, but the ritual remains a party sparked by panic for centuries old. And here's a delicious little complication. Some contemporaries suspected the plot was allowed to unfold just long enough to be exposed at the perfect moment, that perhaps the authorities knew and waited, and let the trap snap shut with maximum drama. Was it a genuine discovery or a staged performance? Even now, historians tilt their heads, scratch their beards, and argue in endless seminars. You, meanwhile, sip your tea and think, that sounds about right, because what's history without a pinch of conspiracy? But let's not forget the man himself. Guy Fawkes endured days of torture in the Tower. His signature, once steady, dissolved into a trembling scrawl on the confession. And when it came time for execution, he cheated the spectacle by leaping from the scaffold, breaking his neck before the rope could do its grisly work. A rebellious little act, even at the end. If TikTok existed, then someone would have looped it with the caption, "Fawkes said nope." The irony is that the annual celebration became less about his defiance and more about national unity. A yearly reminder to distrust those who plot in cellars. Effigies burned, fireworks soared, and across centuries the meaning shifted. Sometimes it was anti-Catholic, sometimes just festive. By the 19th century, children begged coins with cries of a penny for the guy. Their rag-stuffed dolls paraded like miniature scarecrows. Eventually, that word guy slipped into everyday speech, so much so that today you casually point across a cafe and say, That guy over there. All because of one failed explosion. Funny how language carries embers further than fire. So you sit here, lulled by the quiet, realizing how much of your present is haunted by that shadow. Every November 5th, even now, Britain lights the sky, barely remembering the real man beneath the mask. The irony deepens when you think of how his likeness reappeared in modern times, stylized into the grinning visage of protest, anonymity, rebellion. The mask that slips into demonstrations, into films, into the glow of your computer screen when whispers of resistance stir. Would Fawkes recognize himself in this? Probably not. He might just squint and say, "That's a bit much." And here's where the present folds into the past. Back then, a man risked everything in a cold cellar for a cause he thought sacred. Today, you grumble when the Wi-Fi cuts out. Perhaps that's the lesson tucked inside the embers. Gratitude that you are not sneaking barrels through damp tunnels under torchlight. Gratitude that your quarrels are smaller and your punishments less final. You inherit their stories, but you live a different fate. That, in its quiet way, is worth celebrating. So breathe in. Let the smoke of the past curl away. Remember the man in the shadows, caught between treason and legend, between failure and immortality. And as you drift, hold on to the thought. History is never just what happened, it's what survived in memory. What burned, what flickered, what lingered. You don't need fireworks tonight. Just the comfort of knowing you're safe in a world built on lessons others paid dearly for. The candle burns lower, the wax dripping like secrets no one dares write down, and the air around you thickens with whispers. They say a queen mother once ruled not just with jewels and decrees, but with a hidden army of poisoners, astrologers, and spies. Catherine de Medici, a name that slips through centuries like perfume sweet, at first sharp beneath, lingering long after it should fade. She is often remembered as the widow in black, draped in mourning, pulling strings behind velvet curtains. Imagine today's tabloids if they had her court to report on. Queen's personal squad of assassins lurking near the wine goblets. You'd click that headline, admit it. But step closer, and the shadows blur. Did she truly keep a cabinet of deadly powders and secret informants, or was that just gossip brewed by enemies who feared a powerful woman? Her reign as Queen Mother stretched across the thrones of 3 of her sons, each one more fragile than the last. And into that vacuum of strength, Catherine poured her will. Common tales place her at the heart of the French wars of religion, nudging alliances, whispering into ears, and so rumor insists dispatching assassins when persuasion failed. Think of her less as a chess player and more as the one who occasionally tipped the board. But here's a curious turn. Among the strange objects she collected was said to be a group of flying squadron, not actual wings, but a cadre of ladies in waiting, trained to charm, seduce, and listen. They drifted through the courts like silk moths, gathering tidbits of pillow talk that returned to Catherine's ears. Was it intelligence work or just courtly gossip polished into power? Hard to say, but the result was the same. Secrets trickled upward. There are darker rumors, too. The name perfume of poison lingers, whispered about vials that could both dazzle and kill. Some insisted Catherine experimented with toxic cosmetics face powders laced with arsenic, gloves soaked in subtle venom. Others scoff and say the tales were slander, the 16th century equivalent of calling someone a Historians still lean close to the documents, trying to sift fact from flourish. But isn't it striking how easily fear attaches itself to a woman who dared command? Picture a banquet. Gold plates gleam, laughter hums, musicians pluck strings. Yet every sip of wine carries the phantom thought: was this cup chosen or cursed? A courtier lifts his goblet, hesitates a heartbeat too long, then drinks. The hall roars with music, but in the corners, eyes dart. That's the climate Catherine cultivated that others said she did. Either way, her court lived in a theatre of suspicion, and yet she wasn't only draped in daggers. Catherine also patronized the arts, introduced Italian fashions to France, and even popularized the use of forks at the table. Yes, forks. Imagine changing European dining forever, and people still prefer to call you a poisoner. Some legacies just don't get the spotlight they deserve. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre remains the darkest shadow cast across her name. Thousands of Huguenots slaughtered in Paris and beyond, with Catherine often blamed as the silent orchestrator. Some accounts put her at the council table, nodding approval. Others insist she was horrified by how events spiraled beyond control. The line between instigator and bystander is blurred, smudged, rewritten, and perhaps it always will be. If she lived now, would Catherine be painted as the mastermind CEO of a sprawling intelligence agency, praised for efficiency but accused of ruthlessness? Would her spies be interns with phones, scrolling Instagram for rival secrets? Would we still mutter about her perfumes, or simply call it brand marketing? The tools change, but suspicion endures. And there's the hum that carries through all of this. How power, especially in female hands, attracts rumor like moths to flame. Catherine ruled in a storm of fragile kings, civil war, and religious fury. It is tempting, even comforting, to explain her success as sorcery rather than strategy. After all, it's easier to believe in poisons than patience, in daggers than diplomacy. Her story drifts into your own like incense, a reminder that behind every headline, every whisper, there's a choice. Believe the smoke or seek the flame. Fear the woman in black, or recognize the mother who fought to keep a kingdom from splintering completely. And as her shadows curl back into silence, another figure steps forward. No queen, no widow, but the faceless blades hired by courts across Europe, assassins whose names are gone, but whose work carved deep marks in history, sharp as any steel. The night stretches long. Torches flicker against damp stone walls, and you can almost hear boots sliding across cobblestones with practiced silence. The hired killer, nameless, faceless, slipping between shadows in the chronicles with the kings and queens. Their names were erased, but their deeds echo louder than drums. Courts across medieval Europe leaned on these silent blades when diplomacy frayed and patience wore thin. Imagine them as the consultants of their age, except instead of spreadsheets, they carried daggers tucked in cloaks. You've heard the popular tales: lords hiring assassins to resolve feuds, dukes whispering orders into the dark, rival claimants found lifeless at the edge of a hunting path. But under that common story lies the strange, lesser-known truth: assassins weren't always shadowy loners. Sometimes they were courtiers themselves, knights or servants already close to the victim. Easier access, fewer questions. Why send a stranger when betrayal is so much more efficient? It's almost corporate thinking. Outsource if you must. But in-house treachery often does the job faster. Close your eyes and picture a banquet. Silver goblets, roasted meats glistening, the chatter of nobles. And somewhere, amid the music, One knife moves not toward the venison, but toward a rival's ribs. The deed is done. The assassin vanishes back into anonymity, and the story travels faster than the minstrels can sing it. The result? Courts living in perpetual paranoia, every smile double-checked, every cup sniffed twice. To be powerful was to live permanently suspicious, a little like celebrities today scrolling through gossip blogs, except the stakes were fatal, not just embarrassing. And here's where things grow curious. A peculiar detail from Florence suggests that poisons were sometimes disguised as perfumes or powders, slipped into gloves or fans. One story hints at arsenic sewn into letters, inked with more than words. Was it real, or a flourish added later by nervous chroniclers? Scholars argue gently about it, as they always do, each side pointing to fragments of evidence, while the truth lurks just out of reach. The uncertainty itself adds to the fascination. You lean in, as though the answer might whisper itself into your ear. There were entire guilds rumored to exist, trained in silence and blades. Some insist these were exaggerations, products of paranoia. Others nod and point to odd payments recorded in ledgers, vanishing men whose names drop away just as a duke's rival conveniently disappears. Were these professionals, or simply opportunists with steady hands? The debate remains, woven quietly into footnotes, yet the feeling is undeniable. A society humming with violence just beneath its velvet surface. And if you compare it to now, you chuckle. Imagine replacing the medieval assassin with a modern freelancer carrying a laptop, slipping into cafes rather than castles, trading blades for passwords, data breaches instead of poisoned goblets, careers ruined in silence, reputations ended with one click. The tools evolve, but the human hunger for discreet elimination stays eerily consistent. The silence of these killers is haunting. We remember the rulers, the victims, even the scandals, but not the hands that carried out the tasks. Their ghosts with fingerprints, shaping the flow of power without leaving signatures. The irony, their anonymity is their immortality. No fame, but their deeds are stitched into the fabric of history, like the backbone no one sees but everyone relies on. And then there are the stories of those who faltered. A dagger caught mid-thrust, a poison revealed by a quick-tasting servant, a plot exposed in whispers before the deed. Sometimes the assassin was punished publicly, sometimes quietly vanished into a dungeon where no chronicle followed. Failures rarely survive in records, but you sense them lurking in the gaps between glowing triumphs. After all, not every blade strikes true. So you sit here, safe, breathing, slow. Your enemies, if you even have them, probably limit their vengeance to passive-aggressive emails or Gratitude comes easier when you realize your dinner table isn't a battlefield. Your coffee, not a gamble. Your friends unlikely to be spies with hidden daggers. The world you inhabit is imperfect, yes, but the shadows are less sharp than they once were. Listen to the quiet for a moment. Behind every throne, every crown, every rebellion, there was always someone in the dark hired, forgotten but essential. They were never supposed to be remembered, and perhaps that was their greatest success. Yet here you are, recalling them centuries later, breathing in the echo of their footsteps. And in that echo lies a message, soft but steady. Cherish the peace of your present, because behind you, history was once sharpened to a blade's edge, as the torches fade in your imagination. Another figure rises, not anonymous this time, not forgotten. A man with a name shouted across valleys and battlefields, hunted by kings for daring to defy them. William Wallace, whose wanted poster still hangs invisibly in the corridors of memory. The chill of the Highlands seeps into your bones, the wind carrying both freedom songs and the clang of steel. William Wallace, name of a rebel, outlaw, freedom fighter, traitor, depending on which side of the border you asked. To Scotland, he was the spark that lit resistance, the man who stood tall against the English crown. To England, he was a criminal with a price on his head. A wanted man whose capture would prove that rebellion was nothing more than a fleeting dream. The story everyone knows, the battles, the rallies, the cry for liberty. Stirling Bridge, where he turned cunning into victory, using terrain and timing instead of brute force. It's remembered as a people rising, a reminder that courage could tilt the balance of power. But tucked behind that grand tale is a quieter detail. Wallace wasn't always a general or even a soldier. At times he was closer to a guerrilla leader, slipping in and out of forests, ambushing supply lines. Less grand battlefield, more hit-and-run tactics, closer to a street protest gone wild than the neat rows of knights you picture. You can almost see it. Villagers lighting up at the rumor that Wallace had struck again. English garrisons left scrambling, messages darting like sparks. Yet, life for Wallace wasn't just glory. He was constantly hunted, moving like a shadow through a land that could be both friend and foe. Imagine having your face plastered across medieval wanted posters if they had TikTok back then. His capture hashtag would have gone viral. And here's where the tale bends into the unusual. There are claims that Wallace once traveled abroad, seeking aid in France and even the Pope's ear. Whether every detail is true remains a debate litters with shaky authenticity, chronicles hinting but never proving. Some say he was more diplomat than warrior at times. Others dismiss it as hopeful fiction. Scholars tilt their heads, argue gently, and leave us peering into that mist where truth and legend shake hands. There's also the curious matter of betrayal. Captured not in glorious battle, but reportedly turned in by men who should have stood beside him. It's a theme that history repeats endlessly. Not the enemy's sword, but the friend's whisper that brings downfall. You sigh, realizing not much has changed. Modern scandals still hinge on leaks, screenshots, the quiet sellout. The stage is updated, but the script feels hauntingly familiar. And of course, his trial. Brutal, public, designed to humiliate. England wanted not just to punish Wallace, but to turn him into a warning. They didn't simply execute him, they dismembered, displayed, spread pieces across cities. A medieval version of making an example, except bloodier than any clickbait headline. Yet even in that cruelty, something strange happened. Instead of erasing him, they burned him into legend. When you try too hard to silence someone, sometimes you end up amplifying their voice for centuries. What lingers isn't just the battles or the execution, but the message. Freedom, however messy, however unfinished, is worth remembering. Wallace became a symbol, whether or not he always lived up to the spotless hero myth. Real humans rarely do. They stumble, improvise, survive as best they can. The stories afterward polish them smooth, like river stones, until all the jagged edges disappear. Comparing it to today, you smirk. Modern rebels aren't charging with claymores, but hashtags and marches. They battle less with swords, more with trending topics. Governments still watch, still label, still hunt in their own ways. Yet we sit here, safe in our chairs, scrolling or listening, not forced to dodge patrols in the night. Gratitude sneaks in, quiet and steady. You don't need to gamble your life for a sentence of truth, and still, you lean in, curious. Did Wallace dream of glory, or just survival? Did he crave freedom for his people, or simply resist because submission was unbearable? No chronicle captures the full breadth of his thoughts. The mist of Scotland hides more than the hills. It shelters the mysteries of a man who refused to bow. The debates about his motives, his travels, even his victories, continue softly in academic circles, never fully settled. That too is part of his legacy, the unfinished nature of history. So breathe slowly now, and let the weight of it settle. A man hunted as traitor, remembered as hero, cut down yet still standing in memory. You are not pursued by kings, nor bound by iron chains. Your battles are smaller, quieter, but no less real. And perhaps that is Wallace's final gift, a reminder that survival itself, in any age, is an act of defiance worth honoring, and as the wind softens in your imagination, the rebel's cry fades into something larger, a list stretching across centuries, names etched not just in ink but in legend. Kings, queens, rebels, martyrs, the eternal wanted list, where stories refuse to die. And so we arrive at the final entry, though really it's less an ending and more a door left half open. The eternal wanted list, it isn't carved on stone, nor written on parchment locked in some medieval chest. It lives in whispers, in tavern songs, in dusty manuscripts, in classroom debates, in the way stories stubbornly refuse to vanish. From royals who toppled thrones to rebels who rattled empires, their names linger, waiting to be remembered, depending on who tells the tale. What makes this list eternal isn't just the crimes they were accused of, or the punishments handed down, but the strange afterlife of reputation. A queen-branded wolf, a knight-turned-heretic, a peasant girl burned as witch, a rebel cut into pieces somehow. Instead of fading, they glow brighter with each retelling. Legends outlive the scaffolds and pyres, the dungeons and decrees, and it's worth pausing here, letting the thoughts settle. Every age has its wanted list. In the Middle Ages, it might have been nailed to a church door or shouted in the market square. Today, it's trending. Hashtags, mugshots splashed across your feed, headlines that flare and vanish by the next scroll. Different tools, same hunger for drama, same human instinct to point at someone and say, "That's the one," the lesser-known truth. Though is that many of these names only became legendary because they were hunted. If Wallace had quietly retired, or if Joan had slipped back into obscurity, their names might be lost among thousands of forgotten souls. Sometimes the very act of being pursued, punished, silenced, is what engraves a person into memory. It's almost comically authorities desperate to erase someone end up making them unforgettable. History has a wicked sense of irony, and scholars still circle these figures, debating softly in libraries and lecture halls. Did Isabella plot for power or survival? Did the Templars really hide forbidden knowledge? Was Robin Hood real or stitched together from a dozen highwaymen's deeds? Was Catherine de' Medici a schemer or just a queen stuck in chaos? The answers shift, never landing firmly, which may be why the stories stay alive. Mystery keeps the embers glowing. You can smile at it because your life is quieter. No monarch will hunt you down tonight. No inquisitor waits at your door. Your struggles are bills, inboxes, a phone buzzing at inconvenient times. They may feel heavy, but compared to running from torchlight in the forest or waiting for a trial that was decided before it, began their blessings dressed as annoyances, and so, As this parade of the hunted fades, you're left with a choice: to let their tales be just old dust, or to hear them as small lanterns, warnings against cruelty, reminders of resilience, whispers that say your present, however ordinary, is safer and kinder than you think. That is the gift of boring history. For sleep it lulls you, but it also grounds you. Breathe deeper now. The fog of medieval alleys has thinned, the clang of swords has softened, the cries of rebels have melted into silence. You are warm, safe, unchased. The eternal wanted list stretches on, but you need not follow. Let it drift away as your own eyelids grow heavier, the weight of centuries dissolving into the stillness of night. End of script. Sweet dreams.